Winston Churchill once said, Germany turned upon Russia the most grisly of all weapons. They transported Lenin in a sealed truck like a plague bacillus. April 1917. The First World War is a meat grinder. Millions are dead. The trenches of the Western Front haven't moved in years. Germany is suffocating. The British naval blockade is starving the country. The Kaiser's generals know that if the war continues on to France, Germany will collapse. They need a miracle. Or they need a weapon so powerful it can destroy an enemy nation from the inside out without firing a single shot. They found that weapon, but it wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a gas. It was a 46-year-old balding man living above a shoe shop in Zurich, drinking milk and writing angry letters. His name was Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and he was about to board a train that would end one empire and accidentally destroy another. To understand this gamble, you have to understand the desperation. By 1917, the Russian Tsar had already abdicated. Russia was in chaos, ruled by a fragile provisional government. But, and this is crucial, Russia was still fighting the war. They were still keeping German troops tied up on the Eastern Front. Germany needed Russia out of the war immediately. Enter Parvus, Alexander Helfand, a shadowy arms dealer, revolutionary, and spy who walked the halls of the German Foreign Ministry. He pitched a radical idea to the German High Command. He told them, the Russian government is weak. If we take the most extreme, radical anti-war revolutionaries we can find and inject them directly into Petrograd, they will tear the country apart. The German generals were aristocrats. They hated communists. They hated everything Lenin stood for, but they loved winning more than they hated Marxism. General Ludendorff signed the order. The Kaiser approved it. They authorized millions of gold marks to fund the operation. They thought they were using Lenin. They didn't realize he was using them. Zurich, Switzerland. Lenin is pacing in his small apartment. He's frustrated. He feels like history is happening without him. When the German offer came, he hesitated. He knew how it would look if he traveled through enemy territory, paid for by the enemy. He would be branded a German spy, a traitor. So he made demands. He negotiated with the German Empire as if he were a head of state. He demanded a train, but not just any train. It was to be given extraterritorial status. No passport checks, no police inspections, no contact with the outside world. It was a moving embassy, a capsule, a sealed tube. Lenin knew he wanted to prove to the world that he wasn't working with the Germans. He was just traveling through them. On April 9, 1917, 32 Russian exiles boarded the train at Zurich station. They carried baskets of food, pillows, and enough revolutionary theory to burn down the world. The whistle blew, the weapon was launched. The journey was a surreal nightmare. The carriage was divided. 2 German officers sat at the back. The Russians sat at the front. Lenin drew a literal chalk line across the floor of the corridor. It was a border. The Germans could not cross it. The Russians could not cross it. The tension was suffocating. In Frankfurt, the train stopped. German workers, hearing rumors that revolutionaries were on board, tried to rush the platform with beer and sausage, wanting to meet them. The German guards panicked. They shoved the workers back. They couldn't let the plague infect Germany. The virus had to be delivered to Russia and nowhere else. They rolled through Berlin, through the industrial heart of the enemy. Lenin looked out the window at the country he hated, traveling on their coal, eating their food, all to destroy their enemy. He forced his comrades to stop singing. He banned smoking everywhere except the toilet. He wrote furiously. He was preparing his speeches. He was preparing the injection. They crossed into Sweden, then on sleds across the frozen border river into Finland, and finally the last leg, the train to Petrograd. April 16, 1917, midnight. The train pulls into Finland station in Petrograd. Lenin expected to be arrested. He expected the police to drag him away to the gallows. Instead, he found an ocean of red flags. Tens of thousands of workers, soldiers, and sailors had gathered. Searchlights swept the sky. A military band played La Marseillaise out of tune, but loud. Lenin stepped off the train. He didn't look like a spy. He looked like a prophet. He ignored the politicians who tried to welcome him politely. He walked past them, climbed onto the bonnet of an armored car, and shouted to the crowd, "The worldwide socialist revolution has already dawned." In Berlin, the German High Command celebrated. It worked. Within months, the Russian army dissolved. Russia surrendered. Germany had won the East. The gamble had paid off, or so they thought. There's a cruel irony in history. You cannot control a fire once you light it. The Germans succeeded in destroying the Russian Empire, but ideas do not respect borders. The plague bacillus didn't stay in Russia. Just 1 year later, in November 1918, the German war effort collapsed. Why? Because German sailors and workers rose up. They rose up chanting the slogans that Lenin wrote. The revolution that Germany exported came home. The Kaiser was forced to abdicate. The German Empire fell, destroyed by the very weapon it had paid for. That train ride changed the 20th century. More than any battle, it created the Soviet Union. It set the stage for the Cold War. It shaped the lives of billions. All because a desperate empire decided to put a radical in a box, seal it tight, and mail it to their enemy. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you on the next journey into the past.